Hi, welcome. My name is Maggie, and this is my budding YouTube channel, Go for the Gap. Go for the Gap will be a channel dedicated entirely to the sport of F1. I, like many Americans, came to love the sport through the Netflix series Drive to Survive. I fell hard and fast for the sport and have been entirely consumed by it ever since. The timeline goes like this. Of course, I'd heard about Drive to Survive off and on throughout the years as a really good show on Netflix, but never having been interested in motorsport, those recommendations always fell on deaf ears. Until late in 2021, Daniel Ricciardo popped up on a couple of my favorite podcasts, and I, like anybody with a pulse, found him to be an endearing presence, and I was intrigued. I wanted to spend more time with Ricciardo. One dreary Saturday morning in February of 2022, I had nothing else to do. The episodes were only 30 minutes, so I decided I'd try out a couple, and if it didn't work, it didn't work. Little did I know. Like I said, I started the show on a Saturday morning, but by the following Monday evening, I had talked my mom into attending Circuit of the Americas in Austin that October. Tickets weren't on sale yet, but we did have our Airbnb locked and loaded that night. So by the time season 5, the following year in 2023 premiered, I was no longer a Drive to Survive fan. I was a full-blown F1 fan. Long having aspirations of being a YouTuber, but never feeling like I'd have anything worth saying, I kept putting it off. However, throughout most of 2023, my F1 love in full bloom, all I wanted to talk about was F1. I encountered many people who claimed to be F1 fans, but the conversation always descended into some shallow nonsense about Max versus Lewis, Mercedes versus Red Bull, and I'd know instantly that they were not, in fact, F1 fans. They were Drive to Survive fans, posing. When your love for the sport has evolved beyond the shallow, high-level reality TV drama and grown into the love and the history and wanting to understand the ins and the outs of the sport, Drive to Survive conversational fodder is a disappointing means of chatting about the sport. It just leaves you wanting. So, being obsessed with talking about it and having nobody to talk about it with, it occurred to me late last year that I could start a YouTube channel dedicated entirely to F1. Maybe here, in this space, I'd start to chat with people who have interesting things to say about the sport. So that's the goal for this channel. Create a space where I can stop annoying my friends and family with unsolicited F1 word vomit and instead engage with willing participants. So there you have it. A brief introduction to me. Now, I love to procrastinate, and the only goal that I set for myself was to post a video by February. I spent 2 weeks writing a script that was set to record on the evening of February 1st, 2024. But by 9:15 Thursday morning, the news of Lewis Hamilton moving to Ferrari had broke, and my entire script was awash. So, yuck, to hell with that script, which of course was all centered around 2024 season predictions. So instead, we're going to pivot. 2024 season predictions can wait because there have been a couple of huge news stories in the F1 world this week. And they are, Lewis Hamilton is leaving Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton is leaving Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton is leaving Mercedes and going to Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton is leaving Mercedes and going to Ferrari in 2025. That's the biggest news out of the F1 world this week. So now, nothing else matters. Today's episode will be dedicated to this historic move. Disclaimer, before we get too far down the road, I am a Lewis fan, through and through. This move was honestly a little bit mind-bending initially, the window we all use to look into the modern world of F1 just fractured into pieces, and it's gonna take me some time, I think all of us some time, to make sense of it again. Last year's silly season was, let's be honest, a snore fest. So, for the first time in F1 history, no driver's seats changed. All 20 drivers that had a seat in 2023 were going to be driving for the exact same team in 2024. Unheard of. Literally not happened before. Like me, if you're a real slut for the paddock gossip, this was a boring August. So as a consequence of 2023 being such a bore, I knew that the 24 silly season was going to be a banger. 13 out of 20 drivers were not slated to have a seat in 25, and it was going to be juicy. I did not, however, think that that juiciness would start to pop before the season even began. So let's start with why. Why is Lewis Hamilton leaving Mercedes? Lewis has said two things multiple times throughout the years. First thing, loyalty is very important to him, and he is loyal to Mercedes. Number two, that he would love to drive for Ferrari because, anyone who has ever dreamed of being a race car driver has dreamed of driving for Ferrari. They're the oldest team on the grid, far and away the most iconic. So what made Lewis's loyalty to Mercedes finally give way to his dream of driving for Ferrari? Lewis Hamilton, statistically the greatest F1 driver of all time, has not won a race since 2021. This is insane. For someone as competitive as Lewis Hamilton, for someone who has tasted as much success as Lewis has, the last 2 years with Merc have been an absolute slog. And I think that probably had the most to do with his decision. The man wants to win some mother-loving races. He wants to compete for his record-setting 8th world title. And he clearly doesn't believe that his best shot at doing that is with Mercedes anymore. As you'll recall, maybe you will, maybe you won't, Lewis left his first F1 team, McLaren, in 2013. The switch came on the horizon of new rules and regulations, and a lot of people predicted that this would be a disaster for Lewis. Instead, it turned out to be the most successful partnership in F1 history. Left McLaren, came to Mercedes. And just this morning on his Instagram, Lewis posted that he has that same feeling again, writing, "I still remember taking a leap of faith into the unknown when I joined Mercedes in 2013. I knew some people didn't understand it at the time, but I was right to make that move then. And it's the feeling that I have again now." 2025 is the eve of a rules change, so it's not exactly the same situation in that regard, but it's no secret that Mercedes hasn't been able to wrestle 2022 rule changes into a winning car. Of course, you could argue that they have been second place for the last 2 years, and yeah, that's true, but it hasn't been a competitive second place, and it's not a car that is able to compete for wins. Mercedes has only won one race since then, and that went to George Russell, not Lewis. Brazil 2021. So conversely, in that same time frame, Ferrari's won 5 races. And because F1 is such a game of incremental gains, and Mercedes had that stupid zero side pod car concept that they refused to let die, it's undeniable that Ferrari has a head start on Merc in terms of catching Red Bull and bagging some podiums. In that same time frame, Mercedes has only had 2 pole positions. Ferrari has had 19. Mercedes has had 24 podiums, while Ferrari has had 28. I think that pole to podium ratio really highlights how incredibly hard Lewis and George, mostly Lewis, have worked on race day to put that car in places that it doesn't necessarily deserve to be. We also know that part of the contract negotiations between Lewis and Mercedes last year were because Lewis wanted a 2-year contract with Mercedes with the option for a 3rd year. Mercedes was only willing to offer Lewis a 1+1 year contract. It is being reported as of today. I saw a couple of sources saying that Ferrari offered Lewis a 3-year contract plus an ambassador role. Ferrari wanted Lewis more than Mercedes wanted Lewis. Have I mentioned that it is like every kid's dream to race for Ferrari? Even if all of our speculation regarding why Lewis decided it was time to leave Mercedes, the reality is he's entering the end of his career. He can go wherever he wants to, except for maybe Red Bull. So why not try the last thing on your bucket list before you whip donuts off into the sunset? He gets to race the same car as legends he idolizes like Michael Schumacher and Niki Lauda. Where does this leave Mercedes? Well, I suspect that this leaves them in quite a bind. F1 is a sport of egos, and I have to imagine that the news of this bruised more than a few egos within the Mercedes leadership. We already know that Toto has hit up Fernando, who has reportedly said he wants to see how the 2024 season goes with Aston before he commits to anything. Can Toto wait that long? Can Mercedes be that patient? Alex Albon was another name that had been thrown around as a potential replacement. Though this morning, because silly season has already started to pop, it is being reported that Alex has been offered a 3-year contract with Red Bull in 2025. I personally will be curious to see how that one unfolds, because Red Bull did cause Alex some serious trauma in 2019 when he raced with them that nearly ended his career. Though, perhaps in the wake of the Daniel Ricciardo news, where he's returning to the Red Bull family, maybe Christian Horner is lightening up a little bit and making some amends. We'll see. I also don't think that George has really done much, especially in the 2023 season, to prove that he is a guaranteed number one driver, which is another layer that I'm sure is keeping Toto up at night. At least I hope it is. Toto is either going to want a surefire number one driver, Alonso, or he needs to trust that George is ready to be a number one. Another name in the ring is driver Kimi Antonelli. This babyface Mercedes junior driver is set to compete in the 2024 F2 season with Prima Racing. So, should Mercedes decide to pull him up from the juniors in 25, he will only be 18, making him the youngest driver since Lance Stroll came onto the grid in 2017. Despite the icon status that is Ferrari, it's still a gamble. The Dancing Horses haven't won a driver's or constructor's race since 2007. The last time they won the constructors was in 2008 with Kimi Räikkönen and Felipe Massa. We know that historically, they often drop the ball where strategy is concerned, though I do think Fred Vasseur has cleaned some of that up. But like Sainz has done from time to time over the last couple of seasons, I know that we can count on Lewis to trust his gut and pit when he knows the car needs new tires, instead of always listening to the pit wall like Leclerc has a tendency to do. Where does this leave Carlos Sainz? Could Merc and Ferrari do a straight swap? Lewis for Sainz, of course. Though the strongest Sainz storyline throughout the last few years, or at least the last year or so, has been his attachment to Audi in 2026. As the winningest Ferrari driver in 23, I do want Sainz to get a spot somewhere where he can be the number one driver. Admittedly, he isn't as quick as Leclerc tends to be, but like I said a bit ago, Carlos has a hunger that allows him to be a little bit more sassier and more of an advocate for himself against the pit wall. I think and hope that he will make his way to Sauber in 2025, and though it may be a terrible car, I think he will wait for it to become Audi. I'm a Sainz fan and hope that he finds somewhere that allows him to be a number one driver. But if Thursday has taught us anything, it's that we can't know anything, and F1 speculation is a fool's errand. Alrighty, fellow F1 fans, I think that's going to do it for me today on this inaugural episode of Go for the Gap. Huge thanks to anyone who sat through this whole first episode. I appreciate you so much. And remember, like and subscribe. It does a lot to help me grow this little baby into something special. So until next time, bye!